watch the art of a true professional. I've always said the most difficult part of my job is putting stuff to the side and hitting go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we do.
They call it game face.
Who ride? We ride. 3, 2, 1. The Atlanta Falcons chose to get a playmaker and a big-time one in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft, but should they have gone quarterback? That and more today as the 2021 NFL Draft recaps roll on here on the Audible. Cecil, Lammey, Sigmund, Bloom, and Atlanta Falcons. Alphabetical, they're up first. They get Kyle Pitts, the third best player in this draft. They get him at number 4, tight end from Florida. As J.C. Horn said, he's not a tight end. He is a wide receiver. That's what he is. So, okay, they got a big-bodied wide receiver / tight end to be a big-time weapon for Matt Ryan. In company now, people thought maybe at 4, we would see back-to-back quarterbacks, and then they could groom someone behind Matt Ryan and get rid of him when this contract is better. But here's the problem, Bloom. His contract's not better for like 2 more years. Yeah. So Kyle Pitts is the answer to the equation for the Atlanta Falcons, and it's a hell of an answer, that is for sure. Richie Grant, speaking of great answers, safety from UCF, I kind of kept tabs on him a little bit for the Broncos, just in case, had to talk about him ad nauseum and 104.3 The Fan, but Richie Grant instead going to the Atlanta Falcons. Nice strong pickup there for their secondary. Jalen Mayfield, offensive tackle, Michigan, in the 3rd round is their pick. Darren Hall, cornerback, San Diego State, in round 4. Drew Dahlman, center, Stanford, round 4. Taquan Graham, defensive tackle, Texas, in round 5. Oh, boy. Adetokumbo Ogundeje.
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Close enough. All right, as we continue on with the Atlanta Falcons and their pick, and he's defensive end from Notre Dame. Avery Williams, cornerback, Boise State. There's a player the Broncos actually liked. And speaking of Bloom, Frank Darby, wide receiver, Arizona State, the most consistent player at the Senior Bowl every single day, should have been way higher than a 6th round. A sneaky Matt Waldman favorite as well, but Darby was making tons of plays at the Senior Bowl. 6th round, man, hell of a steal. Atlanta, good job.
Yeah. Atlanta, good job. And this was maybe the most fascinating draft to watch, right?
Yeah.
Well, at least the most fascinating decision, even more than the Mac Jones, Trey Lance decision, although that was part of this, was the number 4 pick decision. And for a new regime, by the way, Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith and talk before the draft about do they agree on their plan at quarterback, stuff being floated out there. Smith thinks Matt Ryan's got good football left. Fontenot's open to a quarterback. It's apparently gets resolved. Trey Lance goes number 3, right? Now, here's the curious thing, Cease. Footnote transaction on Friday. Did you catch this one? Atlanta signed A.J. McCarron. Atlanta signed A.J. McCarron on Friday. And they asked Fontenot and Smith. A reporter said, had things gone a different way, would you have made the announcement on McCarron on Friday? Smith smirks. This is Jeff Schultz, by the way, longtime Atlanta columnist for the Athletic. Smith smirks. Fontenot smiles and turns to Smith. Fontenot to Smith, what do you think? Smith smiles. You never know, I guess. Fontenot chuckles. We don't strategically think of stuff like that. We just do it and announce it. Come on, man. You're giving us way too much credit. Were the Falcons going to take Trey Lance? I think the Falcons were going to take Trey Lance.
Yeah.
Well,
there's 2 years, by the way, speaking of Ryan and his deal. They can't get out of him for 2 years. So there's Lance 2 years.
Yeah, and maybe they could do something. Of course, hanging over this franchise, by the way, is Julio Jones going to be traded. They don't even have enough money really to pay their draft picks. So they've got to figure something out. Anyway, so yes, Kyle Pitts was the pick, but we could have been looking at 4 quarterbacks in a row. And then what do the Bengals do? We can talk about Pitts in Atlanta, and people are going to get sick of this, Cease. You're going to get sick of this. I'm going to hit this over and over and over again, and I already have. I don't think there's such a thing as being too aspirational taking Kyle Pitts. I think he's the number one pick in rookie drafts, except in Superflex leagues, but I'm not going to say you're crazy if you take him number one in Superflex leagues. And I think that if you take him in the third, fourth round of your redraft league after Kittle and Kelsey and Waller are gone, that's not crazy either. The football gods could not be screaming louder at us. This is an outlier. There has never been one like Kyle Pitts to come this way before. The first non-quarterback taken, the first tight end to be the first non-quarterback taken, the highest drafted tight end ever. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. People are saying, well, now his floor is Hall of Famer. Well, we're not necessarily saying that. Again, I'll repeat, Lance Zierlein. Lance Zierlein is not one prone to hyperbole like myself, for instance. Lance Zierlein said, where Pitts lands, the other teams in the division may have to remake their roster to adjust for him, to adjust for having to face him.
Wow.
Is that crazy, Cease?
I love it, man. I love it.
I mean, does it apply in this situation?
Yeah, for sure.
It absolutely applies. And look, tight ends in their first year. This is where you're going to get me on a rant. We've never seen a tight end this way before, like Kyle Pitts. When you take a player as the first non-quarterback off the board, he's a foundational player for your team right away. Right away. You don't ease in the first non-quarterback off the board. Look at the impact. Here's some of the recent first non-quarterbacks off the board. Well, guys like Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa and Chase Young. What kind of impact did those guys make once they were healthy, in Bosa's case, and playing in their first year? Adjust accordingly. And remember, if Kyle Pitts becomes what everybody believes he can become, he will probably represent the single largest advantage in fantasy football. Fair?
Yeah.
I mean, so act accordingly. All right. There were some other picks in the draft. They traded down with your Denver Broncos. I say your Denver Broncos because you covered them, of course. But, a pretty savvy move because, boy, was there a big hole at safety for this team. And what were they looking at? Like Eric Harris. So they get Richie Grant to come in. That'll make Harris a little bit better. Richie Grant can come in and be your center fielder right away. And then by the way, to complete that trade, they get a fourth rounder. And they get Dahlman, who's a good zone blocking center. This is a guy, they have Hennessy, but they have Dahlman now. They can have good depth. It was a free chip. They take Jalen Mayfield, who's, I think, more of a right tackle. They have already McGarry, the right tackle they took in the draft a few years back. Could they shift him inside to the whole left guard? Maybe. I don't think that's their plan. It's an okay pick. This was that deep offensive tackle draft, but Mayfield is somewhere in between, like the guys that you can start right away, or the guys with upside that you can start right away that went early, and then the guys maybe who are stop gaps, good swing tackle types, or developmental. I don't know that he has a high ceiling. I don't know that you can start him right away, but sometimes I guess you see a chance to take a tackle. It's a new regime. You take a tackle. Hall's a very competitive press man corner. Graham, they got a rotation defensive tackle. Ogundeji is a developmental size speed pass rusher. I don't mind that. Williams is really interesting. You mentioned him. He can play some running back. He can certainly make his money on special teams, and he's developing as a nickel corner. And then you mentioned Frank Darby, and Darby becomes interesting because if they do trade Julio Jones, they have Olamide Zaccheaus. I mean, you're going to probably see Frank Darby have a chance to get on the field, at least in situations where his downfield game comes into play. And that's where Frank Darby can really help you. And you don't usually get players. Otherwise in the draft, see, we're always talking about this thing like the choices, right? Mm-hmm. So you could get a guy like, Smith Marset, who Minnesota got, who's got the speed, but maybe doesn't have the game. Frank Darby isn't going to necessarily win measurables competitions, but making the play, he's going to win that part of the competition. He's not an alpha. He's not a go-to receiver, but he is a receiver who can play that role of going downfield and making the play. He can do that, and that might be something that the Falcons need if they trade Julio Jones.
The Falcons need running back help, and that's why they got a couple. Javian Hawkins from Louisville. I know draft Twitter's all the rage there. I guess, Bloom, I don't pay attention. Caleb Huntley from Ball State is a player that I actually wrote up on our newswire because strong runner, low center of gravity, tons of leg drive. Kind of sounds like one of my favorite type of running backs. So these Felipe Franks, interesting name to keep an eye on there. It's quite a bit of names, honestly, What, they pick up like 15 guys, whatever the number is. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
20.
let's break down some of your favorite of their 20 UDFAs.
Right. So on one hand, we have New England signing nobody, saying we're going to wait and see. I guess waiting on roster limits or something. Atlanta, new regime. Let's sign everybody. But the most interesting guys, Felipe Franks, and sees how many times have we had a quarterback taken in the draft and we say he's got size and an arm. We got to work on the rest. Teams will draft size and an arm. And it's Tom Savage. They will draft size and an arm in the 4th round, maybe even earlier. But Franks they got for free. Okay. And again, if you can develop an undrafted free agent into a backup quarterback, that's a win. That's a big win for your organization. And then you get the running backs. And like you said, they didn't address running back. So this is Mike Davis's music, right? 2 very different backs, Javian Hawkins. I mean, what you like here about Hawkins is you can carve out a role for him. We talked about Puka Williams with Cincinnati. There are just some of these running backs, even Kenneth Gainwell to an extent, that you're not plugging into a classic bell cow early down role. But that doesn't mean they can't contribute to your offense. So in some ways, the lack of a top running back, a running back that's a long-term plan for Atlanta, that helps Hawkins get his foot in the door and get some touches. Now, is his fantasy ceiling high? It's not that high. I mean, there's not a scenario where Hawkins is going to lead this backfield in touches, even if Mike Davis gets hurt. Now, maybe Caleb Huntley could. Caleb Huntley is more of a bigger back. He's got some good feet, some good movement. And Quadri Olison belongs to the old regime. So I think both of these guys could win roster spots. And these are exactly the types that we will talk about more on the preseason watch list.
Let's talk about more is what the Panthers did. More better. My goodness. I'm absolutely in love with what Carolina did. So let's get to it. JC Horn, arguably the best cornerback in this draft class they get in the 1st round out of South Carolina. He's basically Aqib Talib, Bloom. So when you have that sort of attitude, that sort of upside, okay, you love it for Carolina and what they're doing. Did they get a steal in the 2nd with Terrace Marshall Jr., wide receiver LSU? Could have easily been a 1st-round pick. I wouldn't have blinked an eye if he would have been a late 1st-round pick, as this wide receiver class was top-heavy. Marshall was one of those players to make it top-heavy. We'll see what kind of playmaking impact he can have on the Panthers. Brady Christensen, offensive tackle, Brigham Young in the 3rd round. Tommy Trimble, tight end from Notre Dame, H-back, basically. He's a H-back, fullback, blocker, all-purpose guy. Chuba Hubbard. I so wish it was Chuba. Chuba Hubbard, running back, Oklahoma State in round 4. You want to talk about hard charging, stick your foot in the ground and go. And Chuba gets to learn behind Christian McCaffrey. I like that move for them. Davian Nixon, defensive tackle, Iowa, can penetrate and make some plays there in the 5th round. Keith Taylor, cornerback from Washington. Washington had a couple of corners that you should have been keeping an eye on in this draft class. Deontay Brown, guard, Alabama, 6th round. Shi Smith. Speaking of Senior Bowl, one of my favorite players to watch down at the Senior Bowl because of his athleticism, his ability to make difficult catches. Shi Smith, also a player that J.C. Horn complimented at his pro day. So they go back to back, not back to back, but they grab a couple of Gamecocks in the 2021 NFL Draft. Long snapper Thomas Fletcher, why? And then Phil Hoskins, defensive tackle, Kentucky in the 7th round.
Cease, give me a moment here because I want to make sure to give this the full treatment that it deserves, all right? Boy, oh boy, were the Panthers active. I mean, in some ways, Cease, this is like how you or me or any number of people listening to the show right now would play the NFL draft, right? Like, why, just because you get dealt a hand of picks, that's not the hand you have to play. You can be on the phone. Listen to what the Panthers did in this draft, okay? They traded down from 39 to 52. And for that, they got 151 bumped up to 83, and they got 204, okay? Then they weren't satisfied. They traded down from 52 to 59. Now, they only got 113 bumped to 89. You'd say that doesn't seem like a lot for moving up, giving up 7 picks at the end of the 2nd round. The Browns, by the way, that was the Bears moving up to take Tevin Jenkins. Pretty important for them to get a starter on the offensive line, the offensive tackle. And the Browns moved up to get Owusu Koromoa, who a lot of people had in the 1st round. Now, the Panthers did trade up, in the third round. They gave up 191 to move up from 73 to 70 to get Christensen. We'll talk about him. But they weren't done. They took that 89th pick, and I love this, right? They take the 89th pick and they trade it to the Texans. And as soon as I say trade it to the Texans, you'd probably say, oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be really good. They trade it to the Texans and they get 109. So they only moved down from 89 to 109. It's actually smaller than what they gave up, what they got in the move down from 52 to 59. And they get 158 and the Texans' 4th round pick next year. That is an early 4th round pick. But they're not done yet. They took 109 and they traded that to the Titans. And they got 126, 166, and 232. So look, they took pick 89 and they turned that into 126, 158, 166, 232, and Houston's 4th next year. They took one late 3rd round pick and turned it into 5 darts. So those of you that think the draft is a crapshoot, you may have company in Carolina, and you just like the idea of a team having clarity on their board and saying, nope, let's just take the best trade down. Let's just take the best trade down and amass these assets. And remember, they gave up some assets to get Sam Darnold. And speaking of Sam Darnold, again, depending on what Justin Fields does, they're going to be judged for passing on Justin Fields. There was talk, hey, they don't mind throwing in a lot of resources at quarterback. If the quarterback they want is there at 8, maybe they'll take a quarterback at 8. Horn was kind of a surprise, although, again, this is one of those moves that as we were getting close to the draft, you heard more and more that Horn could be the pick for them. And you mentioned it, Aqib Talib. Look, Horn is one of those guys that he's never going to err on the side of letting a play happen in front of him. I mean, that's just now, and look at what Horn did to like Seth Williams. You want to know why Seth Williams fell to the 6th round despite having gaudy tools and occasionally making some eye-popping plays? You can see what J.C. Horn can do. So he has the mentality of a shutdown corner. Maybe he's going to have to move that threshold back of knowing when to back off a little bit, because he's going to draw. What did I see in one scouting report? He's the kind of cornerback that's always looking to the ref to see if there's a flag after the play. That's just how he plays, and that can play well. First corner off the board, Joe Horn's son. We're getting old. They moved down twice, and part of the reason moved down from 39 to 59, if they had taken Terrace Marshall at 39, we'd say that's solid.
Yeah, great pick.
I think there was some fear, injuries. Marshall's had some injuries build up. He says no big deal. So I think that's part of the reason that a player of Marshall's caliber fell. Joe Brady knows him, obviously, LSU. And you like this, is see if they bring back Robbie Anderson. But what they can do with him, especially now that they have Darnold, a downfield passer, and they can do this with Robbie Anderson, who's played with Darnold, obviously, is throw those downfield passes and let Marshall win in the air. And sometimes, I swear, Marshall looks like Justin Jefferson. It's not just the uniform. I mean, just the kind of mover he is, the kind of smooth explosion that he shows, the game he has in the air. And so this could be a tremendous, tremendous pick for them. And again, one they make after trading down twice. Christensen, another one of those guys. What kind of offensive tackle do you want? Do you want a guy who's more limited athletically but is a glass eater, the mean streak? Or do you want a guy who maybe you got to give him a mean streak, but he can move and he's got the size? He looks like an NFL tackle on the hoof. That's Christensen. Tommy Tremble. And Tremble, I think of Will Dissly here, drafted to be a blocking tight end. And this isn't an offense that is going to feature the tight end in the passing game, but there might be more there with Tremble as a receiver than what we saw at Notre Dame. Hubbard, and this is another one. Who did Hubbard have one of his best games against? Matt Rule, Baylor. It sticks with you, I don't want to face that guy. I want to have that guy on my team. And remember, this team was in on Chris Carson in free agency. So they were looking at having a much better number 2 back than Reggie Bonifant or whoever, now that Mike Davis was gone. And Hubbard's another one of those guys. He's put him on the ever-growing list of players that we say, after 2019, Hubbard, 2nd-round pick. Probably taken to be a lead back for a team. Didn't have as good of a year, high ankle sprain, etc. So he falls to the 4th round. And this could be a great late rookie draft pick because everyone's going to look and see McCaffrey ahead of him on the depth chart. Things change. Things change pretty quickly in the NFL. And if Hubbard is as good as he was 2 years ago, he's going to be starting somewhere eventually. A breakaway runner, someone who can break tackles. Nixon, some character questions about Nixon, a great gap shooter. A lot of people liked Nixon as a defensive tackle, a one-gap defensive tackle. He falls to the 5th round. And when you amass all these extra picks, again, this is you want your strategy. See, it's like when your coverage matches your pass rush. You know, if you're going to have a strategy to trade down and get a lot of extra darts, then take boom bust picks late in the draft, right? Take picks that have more risk but have more payoff. I think that's Nixon. And then you get to some of these players like Taylor, and you get these corners, and a lot of these corners on the 3rd day that have all the physical tools you want, but just the play, the game hasn't come to them yet. You try to develop them. Brown, you just got, and again, to me, this is marrying your strategy to your picks, because you just got a starter on Alabama's offensive line on the 3rd day. What's the problem with Brown? He ballooned up to like 375. Okay, we'll deal with that. I know that this dude is really hard to move, really hard to move, and he's going to move anybody he puts his hands on. We can figure out the rest when we're talking about a late pick. Can you tell that I like the draft here?
Yeah.
Shai Smith, another guy, some character questions. Okay, but what you like about him is they don't have anybody quite like him as a speedy slot that can just run crossing routes, do some things with him while you have DJ Moore running downfield. You have Marshall running downfield. Now you can have Robbie Anderson running downfield. So I like this pick. I like this pick as another element in their passing game. Fletcher, you said why? Why a long snapper? It was Alabama's long snapper. So at least you got Alabama's long snapper. I don't know. And then Hoskins. Hoskins is another one. Again, a developmental guy where you say, man, he's huge. He's got good feet. If we can just coach him up, there's something there. I like using your picks late on those kinds of players instead of core special teams contributors or players that you hope can be a good backup. Take picks that either they can be a starter or they'll be off the roster in a year or two. They got a lot like that on the 3rd day. I like what Carolina's doing. But again, if Justin Fields hits in Chicago, they'll all be overshadowed. All of these good picks and strategies they did.
Yeah, there's another team like that we'll get to tomorrow. It is a Broncos show, but let's talk about undrafted free agents for the Carolina Panthers. Spencer Brown, UAB, hard charger, falls forward, tough to bring down. He's a pick they grab, and, hey, we'll try to work his way into the mix behind McCaffrey somehow.
Yeah, I think that, this is a team that focused a lot more on those late round picks. Brown, some saw as draftable at the running back position. So we'll watch that. And again, this could be one of those guys where maybe he doesn't make the Panthers. We'll see if in the flurry of moves after cuts, he could stick somewhere.
UAB's all-time leading rusher. So the Saints, we go from the excitement of Carolina to the Saints draft. This one will be pretty quick to get through.
Yeah.
Peyton Turner, defensive end, Houston. Okay, late first rounder. Didn't really see him on many mock drafts to the Saints, if any. Pete Warner, linebacker, Ohio State. I did fall in love with 4 Buckeyes defenders. Warner was one of them. The Broncos got 2 of the others in the 2nd round. In the 3rd round, Paulson Adebo, cornerback, Stanford. 4th round, Ian Book, quarterback, Notre Dame. Is he Taysom Hill? Sure, I could see that. He'll be groomed like Taysom Hill. He's a runner. Saw him at the Senior Bowl. Man, he struggles with passing. But as a runner with the arm, you definitely see why someone would be interested in the 4th round. Landon Young, offensive tackle, Kentucky in the 6th. And Kawan Baker, the baby maker. I don't know. Wide receiver, South Alabama in the 7th.
So the question that hovers over this draft is, were the Saints really trying to trade up? And what I mean by that is, okay, maybe they're making calls. The local reporters are saying they didn't really push it. Every time they made a call and said, no, that's too much every time, But then there was some talk that they had a deal in place to move up to number 16. Now, that would not be for a corner, because that's the other question. Were they wanting a corner or were they wanting Mac Jones? Number 16 would not be for a corner. Number 16 would be for Mac Jones, but Mac Jones goes at 15. So alternate realities here. Did they really want to move up? Well, they weren't willing to give up what it would take. We did see the Jets move up from 23 to 14. The Saints were sitting at 28. So with the Vikings, if the Saints dangled a future first, because they only got 2/3, Rick Spielman, for going from 14 to 23, and they did get Christian Darrisaw, so it all worked out. But 23, 28, I would take my chances to get an extra first-round pick. We will never know, Cease. What we do know is they took Peyton Turner. Here's what I like about Peyton Turner. Again, trends in the NFL, or where I think the NFL is going. You want to have someone who can kick inside on passing downs and rush one-on-one face-up with a guard. And Peyton Turner can do that. And Peyton Turner is not the bendiest, most explosive edge rusher, but he's powerful and is another one of those guys, Cecil, that once he does have the advantage on you, he's going to get home. He's going to win, even though he might not be someone who can just leave offensive tackles in the dust. The other question here is Marcus Davenport, fifth-year option. Cam Jordan is getting to that point where maybe his age and production and his price tag, the scales don't balance the way they used to. So this is, I think, Peyton Turner is maybe, remember, the good teams, and we can say the Saints are a good team, the good organizations, they're thinking 2 or 3 years down the line when they draft. They're not thinking this year. So I think that Peyton Turner is one that brings up questions there. Pete Werner moves right into the weak side linebacker position, and this is a guy that just gets after it, fine ball hit. I mean, this is Pete Werner. And I think that if he gets a little bit better in coverage, you have someone here that's going to be a marquee player in this defense. They gave up 98 and 105. They gave up 2 late thirds to move on up and take Paulson, Adebo, and they needed a corner. So they obviously had this guy zeroed in. And it's some of the same themes you hear about the cornerbacks going in this draft. Length, speed, athleticism, and you're going to play him with those defensive ends up front. You're going to play him in press coverage. Ian Book, Cease. Really, should we be worried when a coach says, I saw myself in him when they draft a quarterback?
Okay, yeah.
That's what Sean Payton said. I saw myself in him. Well, I know we throw these terms around, Cease, too often. A gamer, yeah? Ian Book.
Yeah.
He's a gamer. And what I mean by that is there's nothing impressive about him.
And that's why in practice he looked like crap.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing about him that's impressive as a projection, right? But somebody to hang on and make plays right at the edge and win, he's a winner. He's a gamer. So it wouldn't shock me if he's in the mix to start next year, mostly because Sean Payton said, I see myself in him. Not because I necessarily think it's a good strategy to think about Ian Book being your starter down the line. They gave up 2 more picks to get Landon Young, big, strong player that they can develop. And then Baker. And Baker's a really nice pick. Baker is a dynamic slot, played at a lower level of competition. This team, now they often only keep 4 wide receivers, but if they do keep 5 this year, I think he can beat out Lil Jordan Humphrey. I think that when you add in him and Marquez Callaway and Deontay Harris, you have some pieces now, some dynamic pieces, because what you want to do for Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill is short, easy passes, and then some guys that can make some things happen after the catch. So, and in Baker, I think this is a guy that can try to sneak through the practice squad, maybe keep on the roster this year. But obviously, the chant this year for this draft, whether they meant for it to be at the beginning or not, is defense. This is a defense draft. This team has been winning with defense when Drew Brees has not been on the field. So in some ways, I get it.
In some ways, I get it as well. Now, time to get the undrafted free agents. Stevie Scott, Shaq Smith, we'll talk about a little bit. Who are the standouts here? It didn't seem like they got that much here.
Trill Williams. And, since I got to get in, I didn't really stop on Melifon when we were talking about him. So let's talk a little Syracuse Orange. A tweener in terms of cornerback safety, a playmaker. Not necessarily someone that you want to leave on an island to mirror someone in their route, but it's somebody that if you let him use his instincts, he can make some plays. So Trill Williams, a lot of people had as draftable, not just draftable, but draftable mid-third day. They got him for free.
Okay. Your shot at $1,001,000 is Underdog's Best Ball Mania II Contest. Our friends at Underdog Fantasy are blowing the doors off the best ball world this year. How? Best Ball Mania 2. That's live now. The grand prize is a cool $1,001,000 with a $3.5 million total prize pool. It's best ball format, so you don't have to worry about players stuck on your bench and posting those monster days, making you pull your hair out of your head. You set it, you forget it, you enjoy the season. It's the best ball way to play. It's Underdog Fantasy Best Ball Mania 2. Sorry, more Bill Burr. Let's get to the final team we're going to talk about in the NFC South draft recap, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Joe Tryon, edge Washington in the first round. The player that we'll talk the most about is their second round pick, Kyle Trask, quarterback, Florida. Now, big, able to distribute the football all over the field, can't really move as much as others in this class, to be sure. But is Trask their quarterback of the future? Is he a guy that could develop like that? I was actually pretty upset, Bloom, that he had a little bit of an ankle thing and wasn't able to participate in the Senior Bowl, because it was going to be, watching him compared to Mac Jones. Trask at one point thought of as a late first round pick. Maybe he could have got on board that Mac Jones hype train had he been able to participate at the Senior Bowl. He was not. He did not, although I think he was there, as sometimes injured guys will just show up just to be, good teammates, all that kind of good stuff. So Kyle Trask, very, very interesting pick. Robert Hainsey, offensive tackle, Notre Dame. Jalen Darden, wide receiver, North Texas. By the way, Bloom, I just wrote about Darden last night on our newswire. And let me pull it up here because it's something of note. Tough to tackle. Led the country with 23 broken tackles after the catch for North Texas Mean Green in 2020. He's the run after the catch guy with speed and a nose for the end zone, 31 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. So we're going to be watching Jalen Darden. Yeah, we're going to be watching him. KJ Britt, linebacker, Auburn in the 5th round. And then a couple of 7th rounders, and Chris Wilcox, cornerback, Brigham Young, and Grant Stewart, linebacker, Houston.
They really did keep the band together. I mean, this is one of those, what do you get for someone who has everything? Right. Not truly everything, but clearly no immediate needs for this team. All engines go full speed ahead to try to repeat. And I think the first round pick was tremendous. Joe Tryon, a power edge player. Maybe Jason Pierre-Paul's the team that move on from him next year. They did just sign Shaq Barrett. You can never have enough pass rushers. I mean, Jason Pierre-Paul can kick inside on 3rd down, get Joe Tryon out there. A player that if he hadn't opted out, I think could have easily been a top 20, top 15 player if he had carried over to the momentum. So I like that. So you have freedom. I don't know if it's good to use that freedom to take Kyle Trask. And the reason is I just think that he's a limited upside player. Now, I get it, making plans for the post-Brady era. See, so I look at all of these picks, Davis Mills, Kellen Mond, Ian Book, Kyle Trask. I feel like by the time these teams need a quarterback, they will probably look at these players and say, we need to do better than that, except for maybe Mond because of the way he fits in the system there. And I suppose that Kyle Trask and his strengths fit in an offense that is tailored around Tom Brady, but I just thought it was an uninspiring pick. Hainsey, good interior depth, guard, center, strength. I like this. They move up for Jalen Darden, dynamic, North Texas Mean Green, dynamic player, natural playmaker. We look at some of these players at a lower level of competition and we say, is it going to translate? There's a lot of signs that it's going to translate for him. And again, this is a team looking ahead. Well, I mean, they're stacked at wide receiver. They moved up for him, so they're not going to leave him unprotected out on the practice squad. They're going to have to keep 6 or 7 wide receivers because Darden may not see the field except as a returner this year. They've got Scotty Miller. They've got Antonio Brown. They've got Tyler Johnson and, of course, Evans and Godwin. But Darden sets them up so that maybe Scotty Miller is not a guy they sign to a second contract. Maybe by the time that if Godwin, they maybe don't sign to a contract after his franchise tag, they've got options now. They've got the big slot in Tyler Johnson and Jalen Darden, who maybe can play inside and outside and give them speed. Britt is a slobber knocker, 2-down linebacker. Wilcox, a size speed cornerback project. Stewart, more of that core special teamer, maybe can fill in a pinch at linebacker. So they're drafting like the rich team that they are right now. We'll see how long they can stay rich in the NFL.
And then the undrafted guys.
Sedarius Hutcherson. I just like to say Sedarius Hutcherson. He started for South Carolina on the offensive line. He started on the offensive line in the SEC. Bring you into a rookie camp.
Bring you in with BA. See what you can do. All right, there we have it, everyone. That is a wrap for the NFC South on the 2021 draft recaps. Continuing today on the Audible, the AFC South is coming up next. Take a little bit of a break. We'll be right back. Thanks for making us your home here on YouTube and on Apple Music, on Spotify, however you listen to the audio version of this show. We certainly do appreciate you. So, to help us grow the YouTube channel, you love the Audible, you love the show, like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. And if you commented in the chat room, please put a comment down below as well. It helps us grow the channel. It puts the algorithm into other people's recommended channels so that we can grow and that more people can watch us, enjoy us. You like us. You really, really like us. He's Sigmund. I'm Cecil. We're the Audible. Stay tuned and stay frosty.